Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to have everyone here today. We have a really fun topic to talk about and some great authors to chat about it with. So I'm really looking forward to this. And just glad everyone could, for me, it's morning. For everyone else, it's probably moving into afternoon, depending on where you're at. And so let's get started by, I'm going to introduce the authors. I'm going to read their bio and then ask them to, one at a time, give us a little bit of information about their new release that we're talking about in this session, or we're actually going to talk about all their books, but what their new release is. And then after we do that, we'll go into some questions. I'm going to start with just a little housekeeping, though, that if you've been watching these panels, you've probably heard this, so I'll be quick. But you can set us to gallery view, and then you'll be able to see all of us and not just the little scroll and then the person at the bottom, but you'll be able to see all of us. And the chat is open, so feel free to leave comments or join the conversation down there. And if you have questions, though, we might have time at the end for a couple of questions from everyone. So if you could put those in the Q&A box, I'll be watching that, and we'll hopefully have time to get to at least a couple of those today. And there also will be links in the chat for purchasing these books. I've read 3 of them. I haven't read Laura's yet because I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm excited. The topic or the theme of that looks really great, so I'm looking forward to that. But I highly recommend the other 3. They're just wonderful and they're very different, so I think that'll be interesting on this panel to talk about. So I'm going to just start with Krystina. Krystina Rivers is a lover of books, wine, cheese, dogs, real estate, and traveling, and she incorporates as many of these themes into her contemporary sapphic romances as possible. She lives in Chicago with her wife and 2 rescue pit bulls, and as many foster cats as her wife can convince her is acceptable. She has published 6 books, including her most recent book, Feeling Lucky, a book that explores what happens when, despite suddenly having enough money to buy almost anything, 2 women discover that maybe all they need is each other. Her 7th book, Sun-Kissed Hearts, comes out in July. And there should be a link to pre-order that one as well in the chat box. And I absolutely love that tagline for Feeling Lucky. So Krystina, if you could tell us a little bit about maybe the inspiration behind it, maybe a little bit more about it.
Sure. So Feeling Lucky is right here. It is about 2 women who both care about the environment, and they see some litter blowing down the street, and they're both kind of coming from different directions, and they both reach for the same piece of litter. And it turns out to be a lottery ticket. And I don't know what actually inspired that idea, but it just kind of came to me. And it was on my list of books that I wanted to write for probably 2 years. And then finally, it kind of is the one that I felt inspired by, I guess probably 2 years ago at this point, because it came out in the fall, right? And it took me a year to write it. So but it just is, I don't know, it's kind of a fun, lighthearted book that I felt I needed when the world was a little, or is a little dark, right? There's no real third act breakup. There is a conflict but the women kind of work through it together rather than breaking up because of something, which it is what I needed when I wrote it. So, but it certainly is a lighter book than I write. It's less angsty, but it's a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, awesome. I like how it starts with the kind of environmental thing, and that carries through that they kind of are looking for ways to help other people, help the world, help make things better. And I love how that carries through the whole thing. Awesome. Wonderful. Let's go on to Nan Campbell, is the author of 5 contemporary romances with Bold Strokes books. Her latest is What Happens on Location, a one-sided enemies to lovers story that takes place on a movie set in Nevada. Nan lives in New York City, where she enjoys attending the theater and trying out new cocktail bars. And we are all coming to visit you to do that. So be prepared.
Please do. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about What Happens on Location?
Sure. What Happens on Location is a Hollywood romance not set in Hollywood. It takes place in Nevada. The first part of the book is on a remote kind of windswept farm / mining property where the filming takes place. And then the second half has scenes in Las Vegas where there's some scenes that take place, some scenes in the movie that are filmed there. And I wanted to write a novel that was Hollywood, but didn't focus on an actress. There are, of course, actors in this book, but the main story is between the producer of these movies and the director. And I wanted to do more of a behind the scenes kind of Hollywood romance.
So, yeah, and that one was great too because you've got this kind of personal conflict, but they set it aside for the good of the project they're working on and also for each other's careers too. I mean, it's just kind of nice that there's that undercurrent of kindness, even though there's a lot of
Yeah.
conflict that you've built into it.
Yeah, they have it's quite a backstory between these two, but above all, there's this professionalism that they have to make this movie. It has to be a success. It has to be on budget, and all of the other personal things they cannot really be addressed before any of the professional commitments that they have. So the fact that it's kind of all churning and going on at the same time kind of I think adds to the urgency and conflict of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so with her most recent novel, Dreams Entangled, Sophia Kell Hagin continues exploring cross-genre, and I can't talk, cross-genre speculative fiction, this time combining action cyber thriller elements with magical realism, mythopoeia, and a running streak of badassery, definitely. Dreams Entangled follows Not All a Dream, which won a 2022 Golden Crown Literary Society Award in General Fiction. Sophia's first three novels comprise the Jamie Gwynne Morgan series, beginning with Whatever Gods May Be, a GCLS award winner in 2011. And next came Shadows of Something Real, and then Omnipotence Enough. And Sophia is currently at work on novel number 6, which continues her determined search for realistically hopeful and happy endings in dystopian times. And thank you, because we desperately need that right now. Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about Dreams Entangled?
Yeah. Here it is.
Okay.
See if I can get that in this. There it is, like that. It's it's basically two stories. There's the two main characters, they're Gracie and Piran, who don't know each other, and who meet because Piran decides she has this crystal. It's a fossil crystal combo that her grandmother gave her, and with a suggestion that it was somehow almost magical. And but that was years ago, and there's hasn't been any magic. So Piran's very frustrated. She gives it to a friend to have it checked out by a geochemist, and that goes belly up because the pandemic hits. And there they are, and finally they meet each other. Um, and weird things happen. And I read a little piece of that yesterday. And then they start to get together first virtually, FaceTime mostly, and then actually together as Gracie has these dreams. And these dreams are really a story of times long ago related to Piran's distant past. So these two stories start weaving together, and culminate in a kind of adventure story for Gracie and Piran. It's also an adventure story in the dreams, the characters there too. But that's basically what happens. And it turns out there's all kinds of things that go on. There's drones and cyber, all kinds of things. And that's the story. It's an adventure story, ultimately, a thriller-y, adventure-y kind of story, but a look back on what life used to be like and may well be like again before too long. Who knows? So that's it.
Wonderful. And it's a wonderful mix of kind of broad historical, mythical, and then the kind of worldwide things that are going on. And then you've got that kind of intimate story of two people connecting. And I just love how all three of those come together in that.
I'm glad, because I was never entirely sure that they did come together. I got them as close together as I could, but I don't know. It's my second crack at this kind of story. The first one, the Bold Strokes, have seen. So
Okay, awesome. All right, and then we have Laura. LM Rose lives with her wife in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, where they are spoiled for mountains and the seaside, two of her favorite places. When not at her day job in nonprofit tech, she spends her time writing, reading, painting, crafting, or chatting with her two amazing kids. Her new book, Forever Family, comes out next month from Bold Strokes Books. And hello to another Pacific Northwester.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love the idea behind Forever Family. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to get the cover. There we go. Yeah, this was actually inspired by a conversation with my daughter about choosing to have or not have children, which kind of sparked a whole different thing in my brain. So my characters are Lily and Claire, and they, through unfortunate tragedy, become the co-guardians of a baby, Willow. And this is their story about finding family together, parenting together, and then finding each other, essentially, as part of the overall journey. Not sure what more I could say about it than that without giving away way too much.
So it sounds wonderful, and I'm looking forward to reading that one.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so let's get to it. And obviously, my first question is, would you date your characters? Are there any in particular, and why? Or are there any that you maybe wouldn't date, and why? You can kind of combine those two. And if the whole like dating thing makes you a little uncomfortable, would you be besties with them? You can switch it to that if you want to. However you'd like to go. So let's just go in the same order. Let's start with Krystina.
I definitely would. I don't always start out having crushes on my characters because sometimes they have like a lot of baggage in the beginning when I first start writing. And not that I'm like a princess or anything, but sometimes there's just too much baggage for me to deal with. Also, my wife and I have been together since I was 19, and so I didn't bring a lot of baggage to the relationship other than a little bit of childhood baggage. So, right, and she was pretty young at the time too, so there's just not a lot of like baggage that I have experience with. I mean, also I would not date them because I am married, but yeah, I try to write characters that have like traits that I like, people that I would want to be friends with out in the real world, right? And especially because you can kind of look past some of the baggage for your friends that you really can't with the people that you're dating. I think in particular, probably the character that I have the biggest crush on is Reagan Jennings from The Heart Wants, which is, I was trying to get it on screen, but it didn't really work out as well as I'd hoped back there on the shelf behind me. But she's an Army officer, and I've always loved a woman in uniform. I think that the military storyline is such an interesting one. I'm a veteran myself. My wife's in the National Guard, and so I have a lot of like military in my past, and I have a massive crush on Reagan. I think that I would not want to date Ellie, who is in An Atlas to Forever. She's a real estate executive who ends up inheriting this difficult dog and like ends up going to see a behaviorist or an animal behaviorist. This one, An Atlas to Forever. And I wouldn't want to date her because she's kind of a little bit too similar to me. Like she has a very close job to what I have. She has more traits that I have than I think any other character that I've ever written. And also she's dealing with a difficult dog in the book. And my wife and I have a dog that we love to death, but that book was inspired by him because we took him to a veterinary behaviorist and he now is on Prozac, and we went through like all of the things that the character goes through in the book. And I am the one who was very stressed out about it. And I was like, I don't know, can we even do this? And I feel like that's the Ellie character, and we would not have survived if we were both in that position. We need somebody who's like the level-headed person who can like guide the ship through the difficult times. And that would neither be me nor Ellie in that book.
And she'd bring the dog, and then you'd have just too many of them too.
Right, we'd have two difficult dogs that would be very angry at each other, and it would be no good.
Awesome. Nan, how about you?
Well, similar to Christina, my first book was The Rules of Forever, and that's the write what you know book for me. And one of my characters, Cara Tallarico, was a New York City public school teacher, and that's what I was. And so some of the stories that happened to her in the classroom, her frustrations with being a teacher, all that's coming directly from me. And that would just be really too weird to date somebody so similar to myself. So she's out. Um, I think my other books, I am attracted to telling stories about stuff that I'm not too aware of. Like I want to do research. The other character in The Rules of Forever was an art curator, and she works at the Met Museum, which was kind of like a dream job. I think for most people they'd love to work in a museum. And I have like my latest book, What Happens in On Location, is a producer and a director. It was a chance for me to kind of research what a producer actually does. And, a director, I would just love to go on a date with a director and just pick their brain about their process and that kind of thing. So, um, I do think that there is something about all my characters that there's like a tiny little piece of me somewhere in all of them, but some of them are further away from me than others. And I think probably the one that is most intriguing to me was Davy Dugan from the No Kiss Contract. And she's a lawyer. She was a workaholic, but she had this like undertone of sweetness that she just kind of struggled to show the world. And by the time that book is over, she is in a perfect place. She has reformed her workaholic ways. She's just like ready to be the perfect partner. That's like when somebody should step in and get her, but she's already taken. So even though she's the one that's most intriguing to me, she is happily ever aftered with the other character in that book, Anna Resnick.
Awesome. Thank you. Sophia, how about you?
Well, I'm also somebody who hasn't dated in a really long. I'm not sure I ever dated. I've been with the same person for 40 plus years. So and she's not perfect, but she's close, So I'm really spoiled. My characters, yeah, I, yeah, I would say I'm attracted to all of them to some extent. The main characters. There are a lot of secondary characters, the bad guy characters. I wouldn't date any of the men. There are in this most recent one, Dreams Entangled, there's one woman in particular that I would stay away from like the plague, another plague. But both the characters in the main story and also in the dream story part of it. Yeah, and also there are some older women who, even if I, if I think of myself at say at 30 or 40, yeah, I would like to at least be besties with them, particularly the older ones. I wrote one book where the main character is called Not All a Dream. And she's 74 years old when the story opens. She's the main character. And of all of my books, she's the closest to me. And so, no, I wouldn't date her, but I'd be friends with her. I'm friends with yourself, right? My first book was, she was actually 17 when the story opens. She ends up in the Marine Corps. And my first three stories are about her and her evolution from running away from everything in her background and to the Marine Corps in order to get away, to finding her way into the rest of her life and getting an education and all of that sort of thing. And she is just, I think she's magnificent. I really like her. She's everything that you would want for somebody who comes from a very difficult, painful beginning and gets past it more than any of the other stories. I'm going to try to do that in the one I'm working on now, which takes place in the more distant future. maybe even as much as a couple of 100 years from now, and deals actually with a lot of climate issues, because in 200 years it ain't going to be the same world as it is now. So yeah, they're either going to be my friends or theoretically my lovers in a theoretical world.
Awesome. Laura, what about you?
Ooh, this was actually not that hard a question in some ways, because I was like, oh, I'd probably date any of them, except for, as Krystina said, oh yeah, I'm married. And my wife is off to the side here. I'd have to be about 2 or 3 decades younger too, because I'm a lot older than any of my characters. I think though that there are definitely aspects of me, at least that little bit, like Nan mentioned, in pretty much all of my characters so far, at least the protagonists. And I'd probably more likely wind up just being friends with them, because I also have, I put those interests as well. I love painting. I have a character who's a painter. I love fiber arts. I have a character who's a fiber artist. There's those aspects of me that would also make it a little awkward to sort of date someone, but I'd love to be friends with them. So I think that that's kind of probably where I'd end up with any of them, is actually just being friends. And I'd be most intrigued to actually meet in real life Samala, the one of the lead characters in Tribute, which is my first book. And of course, she's the blue-skinned alien, and this is a story set on a colony world 500 years in the future. So not likely to ever actually meet her.
Awesome. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but when you're creating your characters, what is your process to intentionally give them traits that you're interested in or that you find attractive or appealing in real life? Or does that just kind of naturally happen as you're creating them? Is it, how much intention goes into making someone that, yeah, I could see myself being best friends or dating this person? Krystina?
I don't think it's necessarily intentional, but sometimes when I'm writing, it just kind of happens organically. Right. And I write about things that I like in real life, like, right, sapphics in suits. Who doesn't love a woman in a suit? At least I love a woman in a suit. And a lot of women feel the same way. So that kind of like just overarchingly is a little bit on brand for me. So there are a lot of sapphics in suits across my every book that I've written. And I think that, right, things that happen in my real life sometimes like worm their way in, like not necessarily how they happen in real life, but just like things that I enjoy when I'm like writing into a scene. I'm like, oh, it'd be really great if they went hiking. Or, oh, what would be really great is if they ran into each other on a run, thinking I'm going to motivate myself to also go for a run.
Awesome. Well, Nan, what about you?
I think that their backstory kind of tells me who they're going to be in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. And if they've had a rough backstory, or if they have some things that happen in their life that kind of shaped who they are, that's going to give me an insight into what kind of people they are at the moment that they are in these books, sharing the most important aspect of their love life with everyone. So yeah, and some of them I think would be in their perfect state, like I was talking about Davy, best friends and lovers, they would be perfect for me. But a lot of times they are not, because of the circumstances that they've had in their lives. And I think that my job is to get them to a place where they kind of are ready for the big love of their lives. And part of the storytelling journey is to kind of deal with those things that happened in their backstory or in their psyche that is preventing them from being in that place.
Awesome. Awesome. Sophia, what about you?
I start out, I think, with one character at the beginning of the sort of novel conception. And I think that's because I don't really I've really struggled and ultimately abandoned attempting to follow the classic romantic setup with two characters back and forth. I did that with Dreams Entangled, the latest one. And it's as close as I've managed to get to any of that. What happens to me, and even with Dreams Entangled, it started out with Perrin, and yes, her backstory and who she was and where she came from and what drives her and what has harmed her. And that's been true for all of the characters that I've developed. And then what happens is I get into their lives, I get into their heads, and I just go with it. And so I start out with the character and a backstory, a place and a time where they live. I seem to need a lot of being able to literally picture where they live, what it looks like around them, with the times that they're in, and then the story populates itself. And I feel very much like I'm following. I'm writing down. I'm like a reporter. I'm writing down what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, and then I go back and I edit it, and I try to get it as streamlined and as succinct as I can, even though I'm very wordy. And that's how I end up doing these things. It's curious.
Awesome. Thank you. Laura, what about you?
Could you repeat the question?
If I can remember it. I was just wondering if you intentionally give your characters traits that you personally find attractive or appealing, or if it just kind of follows from like maybe their careers or hobbies or just other ways you develop them.
Actually, that's an excellent question. I think for me, it's kind of subconscious when I'm creating the character that I start giving them aspects I find attractive, because a lot of it does sort of spring from what is their story? What are they doing? You know, a lot of them I've given professions or things that I find interesting. And so some of that just springs from that. I don't know how much of it is really intentional as much as subconscious, but they all definitely have aspects that I find appealing.
Awesome. I have a barking dog, so I keep muting myself. Wonderful. And one thread I noticed through all of the books, and I'm assuming just based on the premise of yours, Laura, as well, is that there's just a sense of supporting and encouraging. And it might be a cliche to say I'm a better person because of her, but I think that in your stories that is true for both characters, that because of this other person, they become better versions of themselves. And I think that trait is something that probably is almost universal that we're looking for in people, and it's great to see it show up. Next question is more about just the romance genre in particular, because it's kind of unique that we want our readers to fall in love with and along with our characters. If a love story is a kind of significant component of what the story we're telling, even if it's sci-fi or fantasy or a different genre. And do you think that romance writers have to feel a little in love with their characters to help readers feel that too? I mean, it's different from like a thriller where you can hate every character, but it's a fun story and you want to keep reading and find out what happens. But we can't do we want our readers to just really love them. And do we have to love them too to do that? Krystina?
I don't think we have to be in love with our characters necessarily, and I don't think any author has to be in love with their character, right? But you do need to write a character that is relatable, that you're going to get people cheering for, right? At the end of a romance, if the reader doesn't buy that those two characters are perfect for each other and are in love and are going to live happily ever after, I think we've done a bad job. Yeah. So I think, right, you have to make these characters obviously flawed in the beginning. If everybody's perfect, it would be a really boring book. But everybody has to be a little bit flawed, and they have to work through their characters. And as Nan was talking about earlier, right, with Davy, who goes through such like a journey in that whatever the name of that book is. It has escaped me at the moment, Nan. I'm very sorry.
No problem.
The attorney and the fake dating.
Yeah, no kiss contract.
Thank you. Right. We have to give them a journey, right? So in my book, Last New Beginning, one of the characters, her name is Sky Cole. She's a real estate broker, and I really didn't like her in the beginning because I gave her a lot of the traits that I don't like about real estate brokers that I deal with in the real world. And so some of like the annoying things that they have done and how they kind of seem snooty and aloof, that was in her character. And so during the editing process, I was like, ooh, I don't like her very much. Let's kind of dial that back a little bit so that even though she kind of annoys me in the beginning, then we kind of see her softer side. And I think she really develops as a character. And she was a lot of fun to write because I got to, pretend like I was fixing everybody that annoys me at work.
Awesome.
That's good.
What about you, Nan?
Yes, I think that I do fall in love with my characters, but maybe in kind of like an affection way that I want to see them do their best and have, the best lives that they can possibly have and I want, everything for them. And my character, Helen Cho, in What Happens on Location, she's a movie producer. She first appeared in Like They Do in the Movies. She is friends with this actor character, and she has a couple of scenes. She comes in and she's just like this stealth character that kind of like injects some life and humor and good fun stuff into the scene. And then she's gone. And then I wrote another book, Hot Honey Love, that's about an animation, stop motion animation filmmaker. And suddenly I found a place for Helen Cho to like sneak into one little scene. And I'm like, I gotta tell this woman's story because I love her and I want to see more of her. So I think that's another way that the love kind of expresses itself that you just, well, for me, I couldn't let go of Helen. I wanted her to have her happy ever after. And I've probably figured out the most complicated backstory in the world for her. So she had to really fight for that happy ever after. But yeah, I figure that after this third book that she's in, she deserves it. She deserves the best happily ever after.
Awesome. Yeah, and with my two romantic suspense series where I get to spend 3 books with all these characters, I love that where you can you spend more and more time with them and you want them to come back and it kind of develops not just their characters, but that connection with the author as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sophia, what about you?
I find, yeah, they're in love with them. Yeah, kind of sometimes. One of the things, as I was listening to this, I thought, one of the things I realized is that in every single one of my stories, there are characters who start out as either outright bad guys, or these are secondary characters, or not very appealing people, one or the other. And by the end, the main characters are starting to feel sympathy for them, and again, it's an example of, I didn't intend this. It just kind of happened that these people you end up having a much stronger feeling for them. Not that you're in love with them, because actually in some cases they're truly horrible, but you start to understand maybe why they're horrible, how they got to be horrible, and you feel real sympathy for them. And in general, with the main characters, it's the same thing. You start. I tend to want to explore how somebody got to where they are when we meet them, and sometimes it's about slowly. This is true in Dreams Entangled with the character Piran, who, she has a lot of secrets. She's a very hidden and very restrained kind of person, except when she explodes in rage, which occasionally happens. And something happened there, but it takes most of the book to find out what it was, and it explains ultimately everything about her. And that process, which as the author, you get more and more entangled, if you excuse the word, with that whole process and the people, and And that I'm fascinated by that. That's just so interesting to do, to not, well, yeah, you're inventing somebody, except that all these, it's a little Frankensteinian, I suppose, because what's really happening is you're taking pieces of one person and pieces of somebody else, and an event from God knows where, and it all gets amalgamated into this character who, in my case, there's always pieces of me in not only the main characters, but everywhere. Scenes, dreams, and any number of my dreams have shown up in my novels. So, yeah, it's everywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always pieces of you, but they're so, by the time they get into the story, they've changed so much that it's almost not recognizable, but the feeling of, yeah, that's like a story that happened to me, or a characteristic of me, or something that is still
Yeah.
there, but it can be morphing into something completely new in that story. Awesome. Awesome. Laura, what about you?
I think with all of my characters, I wouldn't say there was any love necessarily, but serious like. Um, and I do think that for romance, especially, you have to have that empathy or that liking for your characters. I just personally feel like it, in order to kind of sell them and sell their story, you have to have some feeling for them in order to get that happy ending, which really, of course, in romance is our goal. And unlike Sophia, I don't think I could write a character who starts off as a bad guy. I don't think that would work for me. I think my characters have to be at least somewhat sympathetic one way or another, even if they have a lot to overcome. I just feel that, with Lily and Claire, I'm probably feel most empathy for Lily, because she's the one who's right away discovers who she likes, and it's not returned, and that's difficult for her.
Yeah.
But I think everyone would still have some sympathy for Claire, and I don't think Claire is a dislikable character. I think she's shy. She's had a tough background to some extent, and their story going together just makes sense for romance as far as that goes. So I do think you have to have at least some feeling for your characters one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just a clinical, I'm creating this appealing romantic character, and there just can't be that distance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
I wouldn't
Awesome.
want to read a book that gave me the feelings of like Breaking Bad, which I watched the entire series, even though I did not enjoy any of it. And at the end, like, just let everybody die. Like, I kept thinking it was going to get better, and I don't finish books. I don't think I can't even. I mean, I can't even think of a book that I've read like that. But that's what I think of when I think of this, right? Like, there have to be characteristics that you like about someone in order to make them want to have a happy ending, to root for their happy ending.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I heard a description of, it's going to sound strange, a Barbra Streisand concert. And one of her fans said, she pulls you through. And I thought, that really is apropos for the way I write stories. I want characters, and particularly the main characters, who pull you through. So first, of course, obviously there has to be a conflict through which you get pulled. And that is the challenge of writing a good story. But yeah, and again, and do you fall in love with people who pull you through? Well, yeah, you do. Think of all the people who were in love with Barbra Streisand back in the day, So yeah, okay, yeah.
I like that. And they have to pull the author through too, because I mean, the idea is fun, and then you have to sit and spend hours writing these books and editing and all the steps that go into it. And our characters pull us through that, sometimes through the hard parts and through the less
Absolutely.
exciting parts too. So they're doing it for the reader and for us. Yeah. And we do have a question from Anne. I think I have half of it on here. That if you fall in love with your characters or are besties, how do you ever say goodbye in the end? I love that question. Does anyone want to answer that?
With difficulty, for me. I mean, I had the first novel I published with Bold Strokes was called Whatever Gods May Be, and that's about Jamie the Marine. And it's a war story, and it's a difficult, violent story. She gets absolutely clobbered, but she gets in fact pulled through at the end. But I couldn't let that go, and so I wrote two more stories about her. And finally, at the end, it's like, okay, I said I would do three. I'm only going to do three. I could write about this woman for the rest of my life, take her into her old age, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave her happy. And in a way, that's if you can get to happy, really happy, which when you're dealing with somebody who's been deeply traumatized, PTSD all over the place, moral injury, through the roof. If you can get to happy, then it's okay to say goodbye, and it's worth it to say goodbye. In Not All a Dream, which was about my 74-year-old protagonist who has lost her wife of a gazillion years, it's not clear. Is she taking herself out or only thinking about taking herself out? And I left that ambiguous on purpose. But that turned out to be the happy ending. It's not obvious, but it really was the happy ending, especially given the wider context, which I'm not going to go into. So yeah, there is a way. That's the goal. You write to that. That's the point, ultimately.
Awesome. Nan, did you have an answer for that too?
Yeah, I think, Sophia, you said with difficulty, I really don't say goodbye to them. They're all still living in my head, and they are going to the farmer's market and, trying a new cocktail bar, or, Nora moved in with Helen and her mom in Highland Park, and they're going to pick out some new furniture and cleaning out the garage. And so they go on, they live on, and they are happy, and they get the ups and downs of everyday life now, which is not as interesting to read about as their formation as a couple. But yeah, they are still, I mean, I have an idea for coming back to Rules of Forever. Like, they have a fight about what school their kids are going to go to, because they both went to this high school, and one of them wants them to go to the high school and one of them doesn't. So there's just lots of stuff going on in my head with these characters. They're going to live for a long time.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Nan. Like, the same thing, right? I love all of my characters a lot, and so they, in my mind, continue to have lives that go on. And sometimes I'll let readers in on it too. Right? For example, in The Heart Wants, the two main characters actually attended the wedding of Kirby and Quinn, who's the couple from Something Between Us. Like, I just think it's fun to like check back in, like just a random cameo. In the book that I'm writing, or that's coming out in July, that is not part of the sale, but it's right. I'm actually doing like my page proof, so the final read through before it goes to print. And Ellie and Hayden from An Atlas to Forever, they show up. Like, they just happen to be visiting Key West after they just took a wonderful cruise to somewhere out in the Caribbean, and then they got engaged while they were on vacation, and they're like super cute and in love, and like, right, they kind of help move the plot along for somebody who is afraid of commitment and afraid of a new relationship and thought that she had her one love. And so I love to let them like continue to live on in a way that everybody gets to see. It isn't just in my own brain.
Awesome. Laura, did you have anything for that? Or
Yeah, I sometimes worry that I will bump into Claire and Lily in my neighborhood somewhere, but it's like they're a little too real. And they do live on in my head, and they could show up in something else eventually. I'm a little bit like Krystina. I actually love those little cameos, when you find them in someone's book and you're like, I know them.
And it's fun to do too I love doing that too, where they're friends with people or they show up somehow and you get to have them back. And it's amazing how comfortable and easy it is to write those parts, because it's like, oh yeah, I know you. I can write what you're going to say. It's easy. Yeah. Awesome. So we have one more question, and then we are kind of running out of time. So I'm going to combine this question with can you answer it and then give us an idea of what your next project is, what's coming up next for you? So the question is, have you ever written a character that you weren't physically attracted to, but by the end you were completely attracted to them because you had written them so well and with such redeeming qualities? That's a very cool question. So if you want to maybe answer that and give us an idea of what your next project is at the same time, Krystina?
I don't have a great answer for this because honestly, I start with like kind of an idea for a character, and then I find an actress that I like, and I like get two people that I have crushes on based on a character that they were in a movie, and it is not that character that I'm writing. I'm not writing like a fanfic or anything, but right, like how they looked, how they presented themselves or whatever, and then I kind of go from there. So I really, and I feel really shallow as I'm answering this question, but no, I start with people that I am attracted to or like drawn to in some way or another. And then I have a book that's coming out in July. It's called Sun-Kissed Hearts. I'm going to see if it'll show. So I brought the cover up on my phone. So Sun-Kissed Hearts is actually coming out in July. And it is a story about two women who are kind of trying to not run from their past, but move past the things that are kind of holding them back. So one of the main characters was married to her wife for 20 years. They met in law school, and then one dies in a tragic accident. And she just can't cope with life. And so she, like, in the life that they had, they worked at the same law firm, and she just has to get away. So she sells everything, quits her job, moves to Key West, and buys a bar. And has been there for a few years by the time we meet her down there. And then the other main character worked on Wall Street. She's been there for 20 something years and has given her entire life to this investment bank, and then gets completely betrayed by them. And she like hops in her car and has nothing but basically an empty briefcase, the suit she's wearing, and herself, and just drives down I-95 and doesn't know where she's going to stop. She tries to go to her parents, but she has like a panic attack in the car and she can't do it. And so she just keeps on going. I-95 ends, turns into US 1, and then she ends up in Key West, where the road actually ends and lands in a hotel. So she stays in the hotel, and then figures out how to heal and how to look back at her past without rose-colored glasses and really take a look at who she was and the person that she doesn't want to be anymore. And so, right, one is trying to figure out who she needs to be, and one is trying to learn that, right, you don't have to just have one love. Your heart doesn't have a limited capacity for love. So that's my book that is in page proofs and will be to you in July.
Awesome. And I think there'll be a link to pre-order that, and it sounds really good. Sounds wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much. Nan, what about you?
That sounds amazing, Krystina. I can't wait to read it. You did a great job selling it. I think the question was somebody that you didn't fall in love with.
I think that you weren't physically attracted to, or wouldn't be someone that you would normally be attracted to, but by the end,
yeah,
after writing them.
I think the one time that happened to me, I was writing a novella for the Hot Hires collection, and I had one character very clear in my mind. The name of the story is New York is Losing Hope, and she's Hope because she wants to leave New York, and she doesn't know how to drive, so she has to hire a driving instructor to teach her how to drive so she can actually drive in the place where she's going. She's going to California. And she falls in love with this driving instructor. And I knew that it was going to be a driving instructor, but other than that, I didn't know anything about this character, and kind of learned about her as I was writing it. And she turned into like the most lovable, sweet, kind of understanding character that was perfect for Hope, and was just like somebody who I would love to meet and take a driving lesson from, because she's like the perfect person to be with you at your most tense and anxiety-ridden moment when you're learning to drive. So I think that's the one time that happened to me, that I didn't know who she really was until I finished writing it. And as for what's coming next for me, I actually haven't written anything in a while, and I'm hoping to start something new soon, and it will probably be something in that Hollywood vein, finding a story for two more behind the scenes characters and seeing where that goes.
It definitely feels like a world that could
Yeah.
be explored in companion books. It would be fun to go
Yeah,
back.
I feel like I've got like a little base now with their movie company, and I can kind of take that in some different directions.
Yeah, definitely. And when being able to move things on location too, you have kind of a
Yeah.
the freedom of the world to, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Sophia, what about you?
I've been thinking about your question, and I think the closest I come is with this latest book, Dreams Entangled. And I think it's Gracie. Gracie was sort of a blank slate when I started. I knew I needed a foil for the Piran character, but I didn't have a good sense of her. Just as the person who was going to get her Piran's, we called it the lightning stone, get that back to her. But Gracie just kept evolving. I knew she was going to be telling the dreams, writing them down so that they'd be readable for the for us and for Piran. But I found that I wouldn't say, well, yeah, in the right circumstances, I probably could have fallen in love with her. But she turns out to be there's a far more depth to her, and she's heroically interesting ultimately. And it was a real surprise for me that she turned out as well. I mean, I was hoping, I needed her to do that. Um, but she did it, and it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, she's very, very appealing character, very important. In some ways, I come away from that book realizing, oh, she's really the main character. And it isn't. Surprise, surprise, it wasn't who I thought it would be at all. So that's where I ended up.
Cool. And what's coming next?
Oh, no, I'm having a debate about what to call it. And so far, all I have is a word that is, ooh, I'm not sure it's even going to be legal. Um, it's about a woman who finds herself, she's living in an era where um, it's sort of like now, only it's a much more constricted world. Technologies have mostly collapsed. We're on the verge of everything, basically, the last of Western or civilization, maybe at all. And she comes from a storied New England family, in what's left of New England. Well, actually, it's now she's down in what's left of New York, and she comes from the very poor, the very indebted side of the family, indebted to the point where she is indentured, because being indentured is perfectly okay. So there she is, indentured, and it's her story, how she essentially frees herself and escapes and survives in a time when survival is not obvious. So I'm only just starting, and I'm about, I don't know, 8,000 words in so far, something like that.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. I
It's
like the
different.
dystopian kind of angle to stories.
Oh, yeah. Happiness in dystopia. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we're all trying.
Yes, aren't we?
Laura, what about you?
Somewhat like Krystina does, I pick actresses generally after I have some idea in my head already about what people look like. So I'd say physically attracted to, yes, definitely. With the exception, of course, there was no one I could use for Samala from Tribute. That all came out of my head. At the moment, Forever Family is the novel that comes out next month. And beyond that, I'm still kicking two different ideas around and not sure which one I'm going with. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're excited for Forever Family. I'm looking forward to that one.
thank you.
Great. And I just want to thank all of you for coming and for sharing your thoughts about writing and books and love stories and your wonderful characters. It was really fun. And thank you to Sandy for all the behind the scenes stuff she does. This just would not go like this at all if it weren't for her taking control and really helping us along through here. Really appreciate that. And most of all, to all of you who joined us, all of our readers who joined us and other authors, thank you for coming and sharing this time with us. And it's just been a lot of fun. And so
thank you for your moderating, Karis. You did a great job.
Yes,
well,
thank you.
Thank you. It was just a lot of pleasure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.